Sir, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So keep asking questions as and when you get them. And are there any questions on the material taught in the last class? Clarifications, anything? And just unmute yourselves and ask the questions anytime. So as I was saying in the last class, distributed database systems is an amalgamation or a combination of two different techniques, which is or technologies. One is database technology, another one is computer networks. And database technology, the key idea is to put all the data together, provide a single ER model to it, provide a mechanism to access this data through a layers and single user interface, and provide access control and all that. And computer networks technology tries to put the data across multiple machines, processing across multiple machines, fault tolerance, reliability, those aspects. So you bring these two together, you get what is known as distributed database systems, where you try to have the best features of database technology, which is integration, and the best features of computer networks, which is fault tolerance, availability, reliability, and those aspects. And they both come together. And there's also economics of scale, which is with distributed computing. Any questions on this? So in the last class, we looked at all these aspects, and then we looked at the implicit things: client server, database integration, cloud computing, and this is where we stopped in the last class. So what I'm going to do is there are all these remaining slides on the introduction, which I will get back to you after today's class. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a slightly diverse path. I'm going to talk about transparency and those aspects a little bit more in detail. And then once I come back to the different aspects of distributed database systems, they will start to make a lot more sense. And also it would help you in your project. Okay, so what we are going to focus today on is distributed DBMS architecture, fragmentation and allocation, and more importantly, we'll be looking at the notion of transparency. In the regular parlance, it is also known as independence. That is data, physical data independence, logical data independence, and this is more of a generalization of those aspects. As I said, keep asking questions whenever you feel like. Okay, so if you were to look at a reference architecture for a distributed DBMS, you can think of what is known as a global schema. That is the integrated schema of all data requirements. That is, you have the data requirements as we did in the basic database course, and then you get a single ER model of that, and then you can map that ER model to relational model because that is what mostly we'll be using. And that's what this global schema is. So therefore, it can be treated as a set of global relations, the all kinds of the global relations, right? And then, so the important thing about this global relation is it provides a unified look at the data. So at this level, if there is a user who is just looking at only this and does not know anything below this, they are just dealing with global relations. So they can write they can say select star from R and be absolutely unaware of what is below that. right? And then the whatever is the database system that is there, it will access the data and give it back to you. Now, since the data gets distributed in a distributed DBMS environment, so how the distribution is formulated or is conceived or it is um, uh, uh, stated or defined is a important sub point here. So therefore, there is one advantage with the relational data model. That advantage being that it has a relational data model and it has relational operators, and the output of any relational operator is a relation. So therefore, you get a framework with which you can merge and break up relations in a very formal way, and you can prove certain good properties of this breaking up and joining. So therefore, this notion of data getting distributed is something that we'll be spending some time on a little bit in today's class and more in as we go along the course. And we'll talk about what is known as a unit of data distribution. That is a piece of data that can be located at multiple sites. There are these modern systems where they can say that a page is a unit of data distribution, right? So where one single page of 32 megabytes or 64 megabytes can be located at some site, right? And it can be accessed. Whereas that is independent of a data model. And there are pretty good technologies that came up from 1990s onwards, which basically handle this page level distribution. Then there are technologies which talk about column level distributions. That is, one single column is distributed at multiple sites. And these are known as columnar databases. There are databases where both rows and columns get distributed and things like that. So therefore, there is this notion of unit of data distribution, which is fairly powerful. So this at this point of time, when I'm looking at this, I'm just saying that my data is distributed into different chunks. But I'm not telling you where these chunks are there in the distributed DBMS environment. So therefore, when a user is at this level, they need to know this mapping, that my relation R is actually broken up into R1, R2, R3, R4. And I also need to know what this R1, R2, R3, R4 are. And I need to access the data at this level in some sense. I need to specify it because I know the fragmentation schema. Okay, so but then I don't have to care where R2 resides. Okay, because I still do not know what is underneath here, right? So what is underneath a fragmentation schema, I do not need to know. Now, allocation schema will say that R1 is at site 1, R2 is at site 2, R1 is at site 3, and so on. And if I'm a user who is at this level, then I need to know not only that a relation R is broken up into R1, R2, R3, R4, but also that R1 is at this site, R2 is at that site, and so on. But I need not know what is the DBMS that is managing a particular R at a particular site. So, it can be Oracle DBMS, it can be a DB2, or it can be something else, but I don't have to know. So therefore, I don't have to know which is the local DBMS, how to access it, and all that. I don't have to know, but I need to know where it is. Okay, and then you have the local mapping schema. And if I'm at this level, not only should I know that R1 is at site 1, I also need to know is which DBMS is storing this R1, and I also need to know the language to communicate with DBMS and do my processing, right? So if it is using SQL, I need to know SQL to access this. If it is something else, I need to know what it is to access it. Therefore, I need to know those details also, right? So therefore, in as we go down this particular thing, I get to see lot and lot of details from how the global schema to the basic fundamental disk or the database or the computer system where the data is. So let me give you another example. So you have this Gmail. Now you can say that, okay, you're doing a grep or a search for all the emails related to, say, distributed DBMS course, right? So you do a find control F and then you try to get distributed DBMS course emails. Now, since you don't know anything, you just give it to you on your Gmail or Outlook, and the system actually does search from somewhere and then gets all the data and gives it to you. Now, suppose if you know that your email, is actually divided into, 3 or 4 different mailboxes, which are, one is all internal IIIT Gmail, one is all the junk Gmail email, one is all external email, one is all that with attachments, and so on. So it is divided into these 4 or 5 files. Then if I know that when I'm searching for my distributed DBMS course files, then I may have to search in the one which has only emails. I may have to also search from one which has attachments, because some of the mails that we send might have attachments in them. Or I may have to also search the email from outside, because there are other students who are from outside the IIIT environment who are taking this course, and they might have responded to some of the emails of this course. So I may have to search these 3 things. So therefore, I don't have to. So I log into I open the IIIT mailbox of this global email, and then I do a control F there. I open one with attachments, do control F. I open the one with outside email and do control F. Now, if the Outlook also tells you that this IIIT email is located in IIIT Hyderabad location and is also replicated in Colombo, right? Then I may decide to access IIIT system, but it may be down. Then I'll go ahead and access the Colombo system, right? So therefore, I can say that open the mail folder of IIIT at Colombo, right? Now, suppose if I say that actually the one that is in Colombo is actually is located in a Linux system, and it is actually managed by some mail provider like Pine, and therefore you need to actually access it through Pine commands. Then I'll have to say that, okay, open the mailbox using this Pine command, and then search for distributed DBMS course files, right? So therefore, there is a level of detail to which you need to go to access this email. Any questions at this point of time? Is this architecture reasonably comprehensible for you all? If you have no questions, do +1. Okay, so therefore, yeah, so this is the reference architecture. There is a global schema, defines all the data as if the data is not distributed at all, right? It is treated as global relations if the relational data model is used. And fragments is each global relation can be split into several non-overlapping chunks. The key here is we might insist on non-overlapping chunks. Okay, it has certain advantages and I will come to those advantages shortly. Okay, and there is a mapping between the fragments and the global schema. So then you have this allocation schema. So the fragments are logical chunks of global relations, which are physically located in one or more sites of the network, right? So therefore, so there is a manifestation of this chunk of data that forms the global relation that is located in one of the sites. So it defines at which site a fragment is located. There can be a one-to-many or one-to-one allocation. So if a particular fragment is located at only one site in my environment, then it is non-redundant. And if it is non-redundant, then if that site fails, then I cannot access that data. So I cannot do count star from R and get a correct result because this site, which has the only copy of this particular fragment, is down, right? Whereas if it is redundant, then I have a choice to have it at multiple sites. And if one site is down, I can actually go to another site. But then I need to ensure that all these copies are consistent. That is, if the salary is updated in one of the fragments, then it is updated in all the fragments. So the physical image of a global site relation R is known as J at site J, right? And and something like Rij says that it is Ri's fragment, Ri fragment located at site J, right? So this is what the notation means. Okay. So therefore, what we have done in last about 5, 6, or 10, 15 minutes is to give you the overview of this reference architecture and tell you how what happens, right? And the notion of fragmentation, notion of allocation, and all that. Okay, so this is how pictorially it looks like. I have a global relation R, and R1 is actually fragmented into R is fragmented into R1, R2, R3. So this is still logical. So one way of looking at it is like create table R1 with a set of columns and then having it. So therefore, these are like create statements. Then these are the sites. This is site 1, site 2, site 3. In site 1, I have put both R1 and R2. The fragments R1 and R2 are in site 1. And they both together is the relation R1 at site 1. That is the superscript. Similarly, I have R1 and R2 at site 2, and then I have R2 and R3 at site 3. So therefore, if you were to look at R1 and R2 are at site 1 and site 2. So you can say R1 and R2, which is actually this. So R2 is a replicated copy of R1. It is completely the same thing, right? Whereas R3 and R2 and R3 and R1 are overlapping. That is, they have one fragment in common. So R2 is common between them. But in case of R2, it is with the R1 fragment, and in case of R3, it is with R3 fragment. So therefore, these are overlapping. These are replicated. So what happens is, the important point here is one thing that people might say is, why don't you go directly from here to here, right? So I can take a fragment and directly allocate it at a certain site. Why go through this process of fragmentation, which is A? So the reason why we go through A is, if I do these fragments, then this mapping is very clear. So therefore, anything that I change in the fragments, their mapping with the original relation is pretty much there. That is point one. The second thing is, since I allocate them to various sites, right, the nature of full replication, that is the complete fragments relation replication, or overlapping relations, this is under my control, right? So I can always do R1, R2, R1, R2 at multiple sites and get two full replicated copies of R1, R2, or I can do R1, R2 and R2, R3 and get replicated fragments. So therefore, in that context, I get my control over where I want to replicate my data. So this control makes it easier. So in this context, so if I call this as 1, if I call this as 2, and if I call this as 3, so 1 to 2, there is a mapping that says that R is divided into R1 to Rn, and from 2 to 3, there is a mapping which says that R1 is located at these sites, R2 is located at these sites, and so on. So therefore, these two are explicit mappings. They are explicit mappings that we can store, and therefore we get control over not only the relation to fragments description, but also fragment to site placement. And it is this, yeah.
So can you explain the difference between overlapping and replicated again? And also one more
Okay,
doubt that
yeah,
when we
go
say,
ahead.
yeah, one more doubt that when we say when these relations are, fragmented, it means that the complete relations are copied into another position. It's not like they're split into half and then copied into different locations, right?
Um, Let me answer the question. So first one is, when I say R1 is at site 1, this complete data is in site 1. There is no part of R1 at site 1. Okay, so the whole R1 is there. Now, see what is happening here is R1 and R2 are in site 1, and R1 and R2 are site 2. So therefore, the complete, so from R, I get a partition which is R1 and R2 combination, right? So therefore, in site 1 and site 2, R1, R2 is completely there in site 1 and site 2. So therefore, it is replicated, right? So whereas if you look at R1 and R2 at site 1 and R2 and R3 at site 3, they are not replicated. Only R2 is common. So therefore, it is overlapping.
Okay, so it's clear.
Okay. So this control, whether I want to keep it together or I want to have the overlapping fragments at allocation time, that is the reason why we have this architecture. So therefore, we have that control over it. Okay, and it is fully replicated. So when we talk about what these fragments are shortly, then these things will also become clearer. Okay, so therefore now when you look at this, so I am saying that R11 and R21, that is this one and this one, right? The one which I have just marked, they are in site 1, right? So now in site 1, there is actually a database management system. So therefore, there will be a create kind of a statement for R11 and R21, right? There'll be those statements, and then they are populated. Then the DBMS actually manages them. So this local mapping schema is the mapping of R11 to the corresponding language instructions of local DBMS to create, populate, and manage the fragment. Okay, sorry about that ant-like writing there, but it is what it is, right? So that is known as, so it maps the physical images of the objects which are manipulated by local DBMSs. So it gives you this. So it's like saying that my IIIT mailbox is on a Unix machine and is managed by, for example, Pine or some such thing, right? So that Pine instructions are the ones which are going to create the mailbox, copy the mailbox, or provide access to this particular mailbox, right? So that's the kind of thing that you have. So there is a separation of data fragmentation and allocation, this separation that we talked about. So it helps in control of redundancy. So it can say, I want R2 to be replicated at all sites, R2 by itself at all sites. R1 and R2 and R1 and R2 are two complete replicates of each other. I have overlapping fragments, R1 and R2 and R2 and R3. So all these combinations are possible. And second is independence of local DBMSs. So what happens is, even at this level, so suppose if I put a star here, right? At this level also, I do not have to worry about the local databases, right? I don't have to worry about the local databases, even at this level, because they are still logical definitions. Any questions at this point of time? Okay. Good. So then you get into what are known as layers of transparency, which is the fragmentation transparency here, then location transparency, and then you have a local mapping transparency here, right? So if a user is at this level, as I mentioned multiple times, everything at this level is transparent. That is, the user need not know anything below this level. And that is the highest level of transparency. Then if you are at this level, then you need to know what R2 fragments are. That information you need to know, but where the fragments are allocated, how they are, that you don't have to know. So user application works on fragments instead of global relation, but is unaware of where the fragments are located. Now, this location transparency has a special case of replication transparency. Location transparency provides for replication transparency, but replication transparency does not mean location transparency. So, so violation of replication transparency means that at least one, so therefore the user should know that R is divided into R1, which is a fragment. And the user should know one location of R1 in replication transparency. In replication transparency, the user must know one location of the R1. That is compulsory. But the other locations of R1, so if this is at site 1, at site 2, at site 3, or at site 5, this need not be known. This need not be known. So therefore, the basic idea here is, I know that R1 is replicated. That implies that there is another framework or another technology that manages the replication. So therefore, I don't have to care about the replications. All I need is one place where I know that R1 is existing. Then you have the local mapping transparency. In case of local mapping transparency, need to know the local name. That is, I need to know what R11 is but not the details of the DBMS or inside DBMS fragment name and other details. So I don't need to know the intricate details of this fragment in a local DBMS, right? But I need to know that this one is a fragment at site 1. No transparency implies all details of the fragments, including the specific instance of DBMS used and the ways to access the fragment, including the languages, must be known. That is what this fragmenting, these levels of transparency means. So, now let me digress a little bit here and try to talk about few things. And in the next part of the class, I want you to concentrate on this and ask questions, because that will be fairly relevant for your project. So I have this global relation. I have the fragments. I have fragment at site. I have fragment at site managed by DBMS A, okay, something of this kind. So if I were to call this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, right? So these are the 4 parts. So now if I have, so in your project, you have to support fragmentation transparency. If I have to support fragmentation transparency, I have a global relation, right, which I am going to access. So let's say I'll say select star from R where A is equal to 5 or B is equal to 10 and C is equal to 15, right? So A, B, C are attributes of R, right? So I have a global relation with attributes A, B, C, D, and I'm selecting this kind of a, I'm executing this query, right? So then this R is not same as whatever is stored physically in some DBMS. So this R could be a table PQR here. This could be a table RST, or this could be a table DEF in these 3 sites. And not only the complete table, but a part of that global relation. So therefore, by some what I would call as magic, this query should go into specific queries here and execute the data, combine this, bring the data together and give you the result. So therefore, in order for this magic to happen, I need what is known as a mapping between R2 fragments that says that this relation R is broken into fragment 1, fragment 2, and so on. And then a fragment has these characteristics, either attributes or predicates or whatever. Fragment 2 has these characteristics and all that. This kind of information has to be stored so that this R can be replaced by these fragments. So therefore, this R would be replaced by fragments. Then there is a mapping here, which will say that fragment 1 is at site 1, site 2, fragment 2 is at site 2, site 4, fragment 3 is at site 5 and site 6. And therefore, I can replace this R with fragment at a particular site 4. Okay, so I can replace this R with F2 at site 4. First, I replace R with F, then F with F at site. Then I have another mapping here, which will say that F2 is actually PQR in this MySQL DBMS, right? With database name as global DB1, and user to access it is master, and the password to access connect to this database is *****, right? So therefore, what this fragment 2 at S4 would go into become is connect to master database with this. So connect to, sorry, GDB1 with master login and password, and then you say that PQR, then you say select star from PQR and so on, right? So therefore, there is that a mapping information. So therefore, this mapping, which is A, which B, which is C, in a period, in a very sequential and systematic manner, will take R and slowly elaborate this query to queries on actual databases. And that is what your system catalog would help to do it. So therefore, system catalog will store the mapping A, will store mapping B, will store mapping C, and will make sure that that is consistent, right? So now in the next few minutes that we are going to look at different fragmentation, I want you to keep in mind what would you store in A and what would you store. B and C are relatively reasonable, but A is the most important mapping that you need to store. Any questions at this time?
Yes, sir, one question, that when we create these fragments, so I mean F1 and F2, the intersection will be a null set, or can they have common rows
Yeah,
from
they
the?
are mostly non-overlapping. So the fragments are non-overlapping.
Okay.
Sir, one more question.
Yeah.
Sir, when we are considering that our data is distributed, so the data is distributed in tuple wise, or sir, the attribute wise, or maybe both?
We'll come to that shortly.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, any other questions? Okay. Right. So, so therefore, for us to do this mapping, we should know how a global relation is divided into fragments, right? And that is known as data fragmentation, or in some places it is also known as partitioning. Okay. So let's move on to that. So it is also known as partitioning. So if you'll see papers on data partitioning and so on. So a fragment can be defined by an expression using a relational data model which has relations and relational algebra operators. So currently what we look at is we treat our global schema to be relations. So we make that assumption. So my global schema is relations. Since my global schema is relations, there is I can actually bring in the complete power of relational data model and bring in the power of relational algebra operators to define fragments. So therefore, the types of fragmentation for relational data model is horizontal fragmentation, derived horizontal fragmentation, vertical fragmentation, or hybrid or mixed fragmentation. So the basic so when you do a fragmentation, we follow these rules. That is completeness condition. That means any data of the global relation must exist in some fragment, right? So at least greater than one or greater than or equal to one fragment. If it is only one fragment, then it is non-overlapping. It is present at only one place. If it is greater than one, it becomes overlapping because it is located in more than one fragment. And the second is always possible to construct the global relation. So there is operations available so that if you have n fragments with these operations, you can get back the global relation without lossless decomposition, so that when you merge, you don't get extra rows and all that. So everything is pakka, everything is solid, right? So it is so the fragments can be reconstructed. Then the disjointed condition. So the fragments do not have overlapping data, right? That is possible for horizontal fragmentation and so on, but it is not possible for vertical because of this lossless join probability. Because if I don't replicate the keys, then I cannot bring back the original relation as it is. I may generate spurious rows. So therefore, for that, you need to replicate the keys. But other than keys, the other attributes can be non-overlapping. So if I remove the keys, which is the common attribute, or I can actually use a surrogate key, like something like a tuple identifier, and then use that for as a column, and then I can have non-overlapping fragments. Okay. So the first fragmentation that we are going to look at is horizontal fragmentation. So therefore, you take a relation and distribute that relation across multiple fragments where the complete row is there, right? So therefore, it becomes like a select on R. So select on project, and this is another select on project, and you get two relations, and they can be treated as fragment. So each fragment is a select condition, where condition is a predicate, that is where clause of a select operation. Now reconstruction is feasible because you can just perform the regular union, right? You do a union of these two and then you get. And the set of predicates of all the fragments must be complete and mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive because non-overlapping, right? There is no, they need not be overlapping. So therefore, if you see this, project one is all projects with budget less than 200,000, and this is greater than or equal to 200,000. So therefore, they are not overlapping. No row can satisfy both these conditions, right? And they is complete because this takes care of all the values less than 200,000. This takes care of all the values greater than or equal to 200,000. So therefore, there is no missing value here. So therefore, these two fragments are complete. If you perform their union, you get back the original relation. Is this part clear? Now, you can also have complex. You can say budget is equal to less than 200,000 and location is equal to Montreal, right? So you can have complex where clauses, predicates that are put together, and then you can still generate all the possible where clauses so that their union is the complete relation, and they are also mutually exclusive. So therefore, from the point of view of a global relation to horizontal fragmentation, what is the mapping that you need to store? So therefore, here we talked about this, right? So for global relation to horizontal fragments, right? So what is the mapping? What will the mapping have? Any ideas?
So information related to fragments, and then like what are the on what attributes we are like dividing our data, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good start. Others? So what would you store for global relation to fragments? What is this mapping like?
So maybe the sites
Sites
where
will come later, right? Sites is, we are not worried about the sites. It's only at the fragment level.
yeah, okay, sir.
So for a
So
horizontal,
wouldn't the
please go ahead.
predicates just define? Yeah.
Predicates. Yeah. Okay. So how do we store the predicates?
I don't know if it's range based, then just starting and ending value. So
Okay.
if it's based on the attribute price, you just store 2000 because everything before 2000 is in one fragment and after is in the other.
Okay. What else? So here are the actual design decisions. So we need to store, right? So you need to say project is fragmented into project one, and here is the horizontal fragment condition that I have, right? And I have project two, which is a horizontal fragment condition. Then I can, so this is project. These two together will form the key. Then I can say, employee is employee one or employee two, which are horizontal fragments, or employee three. So the design choices is, do you have a separate table for horizontal fragment, or a single table for all fragmentations? So if it is a single table, then you need to have a type here, right? Which will say this is horizontal, whereas this is also horizontal kind of a thing, right? So you need to have a type. So this is one kind of a design decision. Now, the condition, you can put the complete where clause, right? So you can say budget less than 200,000 and location equal to Montreal, right? I can put all of these here. And this has its advantages and disadvantages, right? So it has advantage in the sense like you have a big character string and with a predicate clause that is there, and then you read it up, then you need a set of functions to extract that project is a attribute, less than has this semantics, which is numerical, and then it is 200,000. So therefore, this is actually, this means this kind of a predicate. And there is a and clause, so therefore it is now another predicate, and then so on. So therefore, if I want to look for completeness, I need to extract all of them and see that there are matching predicates which are there and everything is put together, right? So I need to do a lot of that processing. Now, as one of you suggested, I can just say that I will have a separate table for horizontal fragmentation. I'll say attribute, I'll say the predicate condition, I can say value, and then I can store this like this. So I can say budget less than 200,000, right? And then I can just say, I can say all my predicates are conjunctive predicates. Even the disjunctive predicates, I'll convert them to conjunctive predicates. And then since I'm storing all of them, I'll say location equal to Montreal, right? I can store it in this manner, or I can design some other way of storing it, right? So therefore, just storing the predicates of a horizontal fragmentation has multiple design choices. And so the question that you would ask in this, the query that you would run is, give me all the horizontal fragments of a relation R. Then what will you give? And what is the function call that is going to take this as a input, and what kind of processing it will do, right? So based on that, you need to design on this this particular table. Any questions at this point of time?
So one question, can we just have one kind of fragmentation for the whole system and remove this column?
Type column?
Yeah, type column, sorry. Yeah.
No. You have to, as in the project, you have to support horizontal, vertical, and derived horizontal fragmentation.
Okay.
So therefore, there is no choice. Yeah. Others? So is this part clear? That is, there are these multiple ways. So that design choice becomes critical. So therefore, I'll tell you how we are going to move forward with this. Okay, so that is horizontal fragmentation. And here there is a another example. So suppose if you have supplier, right? Supplier with supplier number, name, and city. Then if city has two values, SF and LA, right? Then supplier one is city is equal to SF, city is equal to LA, and supplier is equal to supplier one union supplier two, right? So this is a straightforward example. Now, there is a notion of derived horizontal fragmentation. What derived horizontal fragmentation says is, suppose if I have supplier, LA supplier, and San Francisco supplier. This is a horizontal fragmentation of supplier relation. Then I have this supply relation. All I'm saying is give me all those rows that can join with supplier at LA. Give me all the rows that can join with suppliers in SF. That means these are the things that LA suppliers have supplied all these parts, and San Francisco suppliers, this is the part number, right? These are all the parts that San Francisco supplier has supplied. So these are known as derived horizontal fragments because they have been derived from horizontal fragmentation of some other relation. Okay, so the way to do it is you say supply one is equal to supply semi-join supplier. That is, take all the rows of supply which can join with supplier one. Those rows will form so this semi-join is project all attributes of supply natural regular join with supplier one. That is what semi-join means. So you give me all the rows of supply which will join with supplier one. Give me all the rows of supply which will join with supplier two. That is what this semi-join operation will do. And you get supply one and supply two. So these are derived horizontal fragments, right? So any question on derived horizontal fragments?
So, sir, here first we get supply. We'll get all the
You will get
rows from.
supplier one and supplier two.
Okay, first we get them, and then we make
yeah.
supply, and then again send them to supply.
No.
No, I didn't understand
so
that.
I have this supplier one, which is all those suppliers where location is San Francisco. So they will have the key, right? Supplier will be 1, 2, and so on. And all the locations which are in LA, there will be 3, 4, and so on, right? And here, this supplier number has supplied part number, right? So I can say one has supplied part number one has supplied part number 2. Then part number 1 is supplied by 3. Part number 2 is supplied by 2, and so on, right? So this is supply number, and this is part number. Agreed?
Okay.
So therefore, then you are joining this column with this column.
Okay.
And then you will get 1, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 2 as supply 1, which says that these are the Los Angeles suppliers who have given parts 1 and 2.
Okay.
And then I get 3 and 1. These are the San Francisco suppliers who have given me part 1.
Okay.
That's what it means. Okay. Take a look at it. Wait for a couple of minutes and try to understand this.
So in the last statement you meant Los Angeles, right? Because 3 is in.
Sorry, this is Los Angeles. Yes, thank you. And these are all San Francisco.
Right. So also, if the supply had city instead of supply number, then could we have performed a direct split? or will there be
No,
again conditions?
because it again depends. So we don't know what the context of the city is.
Okay.
Right? Is the city of where the project is located, or is the city where the supplier who has supplied there? So that there will be ambiguity there.
Okay.
Sir, in this, suppose, sir, if there are more than two cities, then it will be divided in more than that number of chunks, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So maybe, maybe not. So for example, if say that let there be San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York, right? I can have one fragment where I can say city is equal to San Francisco or city is equal to New York,
Yes, means it
right?
depends on the query.
On the fragmentation scheme,
Okay,
how
okay, sir.
you fragment it, right? So therefore, the number of fragments can be in this case 3, or I can say San Francisco and supplier number less than 40, right? That could be also another fragment.
Yes, sir.
So therefore, these domain values which are there, right, that determine the fragments.
Okay, sir. And so these predicates will be stored in our mapping.
That's where we are coming to. So now that you know the derived horizontal fragmentation, so if you go back here for so this is the mapping that we were looking at, right? Where is this mapping, right? So for derived horizontal fragment, what do you need to store? You need to store that my derived horizontal fragment 1. Then I need to know store the horizontal fragmentation on which it is based on. Then I need to know which horizontal fragment of this horizontal fragmentation scheme that is on which it is stored. And then I need to have any other details if they are required. So I need to store that also, right? So therefore, once I have this horizontal fragmentation, there will be a horizontal fragmentation key, right? So 1, 2, 3. So this horizontal fragmentation key has to be there. Then there can be a horizontal fragment number, right? A1, A2, and A3. And then I need to say that what horizontal fragment number it is here. So therefore, these connections have to be made. Is this clear? So each time that you define a horizontal fragmentation, the global relation mapping to that particular horizontal fragment or derived horizontal fragment has to be there.
Sir, I'm a little bit confused, sir. The condition when we are using in the below slide, so when you have given that condition, so that condition will be stored as a predicate condition, no?
Okay, so I have a global relation, right?
Yes, sir.
This global relation has been divided into horizontal fragments using a horizontal fragmentation scheme like city is equal to SF or city is equal to LA.
Yes, sir.
Right? Now on this horizontal fragmentation, another relation, say supply, is
Yes.
derived horizontally fragmented.
Yes, sir.
Into supply 1 and supply 2, right?
Okay, sir.
So now in my global relation, this mapping is in one table.
Yes, sir.
Now this mapping that this is a derived, so I have a derived horizontal fragment A.
Yes, sir.
Which is or supply 1, say.
Yes, sir.
So for supply 1, what do I need to store? For supply 1, I need to store this horizontal fragmentation scheme ID.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Got it,
And
sir.
in this horizontal fragmentation scheme, I need to store the horizontal fragmentation scheme fragment ID, that it is supplier 1. If this is supplier 1, I need to store that.
Yes, sir.
And then I need to add anything else that I want to add.
Yes, sir.
So is that part clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Everybody, so you need to have that. So therefore, the design of these tables for storing these mappings become that more interesting and a challenging piece of work. Okay.
Sir.
Yeah.
So ideally, till what level do we do derived horizontal fragmenting?
We can go up to any level.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Sir, would
yeah, go ahead, please.
Sir, would the semi-join need to be an equi-join, or could it be, some other operator?
No,
Because if it was some other,
it is equi-join. It is a
okay.
equi-join. It's basically on keys.
Okay. So that way it would eliminate, because if it weren't, then you wouldn't have disjoint fragments, right?
Right. No. There is a other part of the story which will talk about whether they are disjoint or not.
Okay.
Yeah. So, as you can see, right, these design of this system catalog that we were talking about, that will store the mapping from global relation to horizontal fragments, global relation to derived horizontal fragment, right? All these tables have to be very well structured, and the functions that use this to get you the output that is going to be amenable for processing for your queries. All those becomes a very interesting design challenges. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so let's move forward. This is fairly straightforward. So vertical fragmentation of a global relation is the subset of attributes. For relations, the key attributes are repeated, or you can have a surrogate key. Fragments are obtained by projecting the global relation over each subset. So for example, for employee, if you have employee number, which is the key and these attributes, then employee 1 could be this, and these 3 attributes being one vertical fragment, and these 2 attributes being another vertical fragment, right? So therefore, employee 1 is this and employee 2. And to reconstruct, you just do a natural join, or to join these 2. And because the key is replicated, it becomes a basic concatenation of this. And the extreme form of this is columnar databases, right? Where key and value are actually stored as separate tables, right? Or separate entities, or separate data chunks. So this is vertical fragmentation. Any questions on vertical fragmentation? So from the relational data model perspective, it becomes very clear, right? So from the relational data model perspective, it is just a projection operation. So now going back to this one. So how do I store vertical fragments?
Sir, can I know what is the advantage of vertical fragmentation? Because, I mean, the memory occupied by it will be much more, right? So why do we do it?
Possibly, but it's only the key that I'm repeating, right?
Yes.
So let us say you have the student information in IMS, right? And then you have other. Most of the time, what do people access? They access roll number and the name of the student, right? Very rarely they access date of birth or your hometown or your other things.
Yes.
So currently, if I'm accessing a relay, the complete table, I'm accessing a lot of non-redundant row attributes for my query. Whereas if I vertically fragment it as a roll number and name, and if most of my queries are on get me the name with this roll number, then I just access that small fragment, right? So the number of rows that I can fit in a disk page increases because the row size has reduced, right? And the total number of disk block accesses would also reduce.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't have to. So what happens is there is a tremendous tremendous move towards what are known as second normal form relations, because you want to maintain all the columns which are related, like employee number and the department name the employee works, along with all the other information, because you frequently access department name. So you get very long relations which have many attributes. And for each query, there's no point in accessing all the attributes. If you vertically fragment it, then it becomes very simple. And the really extreme case of that is the columnar key value storage, where employee number, name, employee number, location, employee number, phone number, employee number, email, are all separate relations, right? And yeah, go ahead.
Nothing, sir. It's
Okay.
clarified.
Okay. Right. So for vertical fragmentation, what would you store? So you'll say my global relation, and then you will say vertical fragment ID, and then you will say attribute name, right, or ID, right? So you'll say V1 and attribute employee number, V2, V1 name, and so on. Okay. So, and then I will store. Then I'll say V2 employee number, V2 tax, V2 salary. I'll store this. So then I'll basically need to, yeah. What's the question? Yeah. If your voice is not clear, you can also type it in.
Yeah, hello.
Yeah. Yes, Akhilesh. Okay. Fine. So therefore, I need to store this vertical fragmentation information, right? So yeah.
You can go ahead. I can type.
Yeah. Please try. That will be better. Yeah. Okay. So any questions on vertical fragmentation? So what we have done, if I shrink this, we have shown that there are three major types of fragmentation. One is horizontal fragmentation, one is derived horizontal fragmentation, and the third one is vertical fragmentation. And I need to store the mapping between global relation and these fragments, right? And then I need to extract this. So if I say, give me all the fragments of a particular relation, I should be able to get that in a data structure, and then I should be able to process that data structure. Any questions on this? +1 if you understand this aspect. Yeah, and +2 if you feel that okay, I have not understood, but I'll see the recording and make a sense out of it. Okay, that was a joke. Okay. Anyway, so right, so the fragmentation, storing the description of the fragments is the challenge, and that's the challenge. After that, it is all easy, right? So therefore, I have a allocation table which will say fragment 1 site 1 and the fragment 1 site 2, and then I can have this kind of a information. That is very straightforward to store that, right? And I can give the IP address. I can say the login credentials. Then I can say DBMS at site 1. I can say it is MySQL which is at site 1. and then login database name, I can store it. Then I can store in the login credentials and so on. I can have another table for that, right? And then I can say that this fragment is known as fragment F1 prime in site1. And this fragment is known as F2 prime in site1, and so on. I can store that information. So therefore, the remaining parts, so if I go back here, maybe, yeah, here is good enough. So if I go back here, right, so this, let me use this. So this part is the, this mapping is the difficult mapping. After that, all the remaining mappings, right, this mapping and other remaining mappings are very straightforward to store. So, so this, if you get it right, and if you don't make any errors in this, then your system would run well. So here in this mapping, you have horizontal fragment, vertical fragment, and derived horizontal fragment, all three aspects here. Okay. Any questions? So from your point of view, the project point of view, which I'm going to put out as a note, these things, the definition of horizontal fragments, definition of derived horizontal fragments, definition of vertical fragments, these are the only three that you are going to support, right? They are become the requirement analysis for you. You need to draw the ER model for your system catalog and then map it to relational databases. And then you are going to create and store. And second thing that you are going to do is you are going to take a application environment, any application environment, hospital or sports or university or any such environment, and you are going to actually again come up with a ER model for that environment and the corresponding relations, and you are going to store that also in the system catalog, right? And then we are going to look at how you are going to store the mapping of the fragments and so on. I'll put that up either later today or latest by tomorrow evening, the descriptions of those projects and the deliverables. Any question on the project side? By the way, there is a tutorial every Monday from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. and you know, where all these queries would be addressed. So the next one is a mixed or hybrid fragmentation, which can be a combination of horizontal and vertical fragmentation, right? Are represented by fragmentation tree with root as global relations and leaves as fragments, and intermediate nodes correspond to intermediate results of fragment defining expressions. The set of nodes which are children of a given node represent the decomposition of the fragmentation operation, that is vertical. So I can say these are vertical fragments V1, V2, V3, or these are horizontal fragments HF1, HF2, and HF3, this kind of things. So let's look at an example, right? So here is a mixed fragmentation. Employee 1 with employee number, name, salary, tax with department number less than or equal to 10, and the remaining attributes with the department number less than or equal to 10. And here it is department number greater than 10. So if you look at this, the corresponding fragmentation tree is, this is the global relation. You are saying that first you perform the horizontal fragmentation where dnum is less than or equal to 10 and dnum is greater than 10. And here you are performing a vertical fragmentation where employee 1 as employee number, name, salary, and tax, and employee 2 has manager number and department number. And here employee 3 has name and department number, and employee 4 as manager number, salary, and tax. So here salary and tax are with name here, and salary or tax are with manager number here, right? So this is a mixed fragmentation, or you can also call it as hybrid fragmentation. That is a combination of vertical and horizontal. Okay. Okay. So this is what I wanted to present in terms of different kinds of fragmentations and the mappings and everything. So note that in mixed fragmentation also I can look for completeness and also I can look for reconstruction. So my employee here is actually employee 1 join employee 2 union employee 3 join employee 4, right? So I can reconstruct back the original relation by using this. There is another important point that I wanted to present here, which is that we are treating the whole data in the context of relations because it is easy to look at relational algebra operations, right? So therefore, there is an implicit assumption here that the data at the site can be mapped to a relation. So after that, my whole global relation fragments and all that tamasha, that will go ahead. Okay. Okay. There's a question from Akhilesh. He said that, but I have said that vertical fragment, the number of rows drops. I think the IO bandwidth increases. No, so in a vertical fragment, that's a very good question. Okay. So the difference between vertical and horizontal fragments, the number of rows is equal to number of rows of global relation. Here, the number of columns equal to number of columns of global relation. So, and here it is number of columns is less than number of columns of global relation. Here it is number of rows is less than number of rows of global relation. So this is the big difference. So therefore, in a vertical fragment, since the original global relation could have 100 attributes, so a vertical fragment can have only 5 attributes, right, of this. So even though the number of rows n and n is same, this will occupy less number of disk blocks. Okay, so if I said that the number of rows drops for vertical fragmentation, that was a mistake. That's wrong. Okay, for vertical fragments, the number of rows in the vertical fragment and the number of rows in the global relation are the same. For horizontal fragments, the number of columns in global relation and the number of columns in the horizontal fragment are the same, but the number of rows could vary. Questions, concerns?
Sir, does the reconstruction condition not imply completion?
Yeah, Jeta.
Hello?
Yeah.
Does the reconstruction condition not imply completion condition?
Can you clarify that?
If you're able to reconstruct, so if you fragmented and you're able to, from the fragments, you're able to reconstruct your original global relation, does it not mean that you've also satisfied completion inherently?
Yes. Yes, you would have done that. That's a correct answer. Except that whether the fragments are non-overlapping or overlapping, that aspect is not there. So in the reconstruction, you can still have overlapping fragments, and you are reconstructing the global relation.
Right, but that doesn't change that completion is still redundant, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. The reconstruction is there is a slight aspect here which is a little tricky in the sense that the reconstruction operator should work on all the fragments, or all the fragments which contain at least one piece of the global relation. If they work on fewer fragments, then you don't get the completeness.
But even if it works on fewer fragments, if it's able to regenerate the global relation, it means.
So that's what I'm saying. All those fragments which contain at least one part, one of the global relations pieces of data.
Okay.
Right. So, for example, if there is city in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, though I have the reconstruction operator, which is union, but if I do union of San Francisco and Los Angeles, I won't get the complete global relation.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. We will end the class at this time, because in the next class, I will talk about more on the transparency and various examples. And so what I would ask you to start doing is, start thinking about is this one. I would ask you to, where is this? Yeah. Now that I have written quite a bit here, right? So assume that there is a, let me use another color so that, so assume there is a SQL query here. Now I have this fragmentation schema. So there is a mapping between R2 fragments. Then there is a mapping between fragments to sites. Then there is a mapping from fragment at site to fragment at in local DBMS at site, right? So this much you have, right? So there is a mapping 1, mapping 2, and mapping 3. I want you to say what kind of functions would you want to run, so that if you have a SQL query on global relation to get to the level F at site, what do you need to do? Start thinking about some of these things. And then on Monday's class, we will relook at some of these aspects. And then now you know that if it is a horizontal fragmentation, what will one contain? If it is vertical fragmentation, what will one contain, and so on. Those aspects you have some understanding of it, and then you start thinking about it. Okay. Any other questions, concerns?
Sir, can you do one thing? I mean, can you upload these slides instead of the ones, like the annotated ones, instead of the?
There is a recording available. That will
I
be
know,
better.
But again, we have to take screenshots. It's additional effort.
Why do you need to take a screenshot?
Okay, because when we refer to these slides, we'll actually we'll be able to recollect more of what you taught in the class rather than
Okay.
the other set
I
of
thought
slides.
these are fairly confusing, So let me see. Okay, I'll do that. Okay, because even if I look at it, I would be confused with this, especially with my handwriting. Anyway, if you guys want it, I'll do that. But they'll come after Monday's class, because by Monday's class I'll complete the whole thing. Okay.
Okay, sir.
But you can because the image by itself would not make much sense than the talk behind the image, I think. So it's like seeing snapshots of Mission Impossible and trying to make sense of the story. Right. Anyway, this project is Mission Impossible for you guys. Anyway. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, have fun. I'll put up some slides, some of these, and then I'll refine it. Okay. Okay then. Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you, sir.